In your work at Ascend AI, you help build an office of AI for organizations. How do you educate the business owners in a technology that they don't really have much insight into at all?
The technology that's available today wasn't even available 18 months ago. When you have that kind of shift, the business owner going, well, I didn't even know that was available. There are some trainings that need to be done inside there. There's a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. So
Meet Craig Heile, head of GTM AI Solutions at Ascend AI. He's also the co-founder and advisor at Launch GTM. Craig is an expert at transforming AI from a broad concept into a practical, repeatable growth engine for mid-market companies.
if a company does not have that AI vision, it's difficult to have it so inside of the engineering teams to know what their guardrails are and what they need to be operating against. The company is going to have to go through a transition to understand how and where an engineer needs to fit inside the organization. Yes, the technology is moving faster than people can keep up, but bigger than that, the technology is entering companies at a pace that the companies can't keep up, which is even a bigger problem.
One end, I feel like you want to encourage people to be using and learning about these tools, but then you need guardrails and you need to be aware, some sort of transparency. So how do people even go to approach?
No, it's a good question because
Welcome back to another episode of the Dark Arts of Software Engineering Team Optimization. I'm Franz, Aliquo, and this is my co-host, Kyle Johnson. We're the founders of Hellenic, and we build engineering teams that actually function for startups by combining agile training with psychology, neuroscience, and semantics. This is our show about what really makes teams tick. Today, we're exploring the high-stakes translation layer between business vision and technical execution. Our guest is Craig Heile, partner and head of AI strategy of Ascend AI and a veteran of the Enterprise Partner Channel. Craig has spent his career navigating the gap that exists between what a business owner thinks they need and what an engineer actually needs to build. From leading global partner organizations for giants like HP and McCann to his current work building the Office of AI for small enterprises, Craig and his team specialize in creating durable value through AI integration. Craig, welcome to the show.
thank you very much, Franz.
Awesome to have you. I guess we could just jump right in, and that's one of the things that I think was very interesting to me also about the intro, is kind of that gap between what a business owner thinks they need, and what an engineer actually builds. And, you've said that the biggest problem in AI development right now isn't actually at the engineering level. It's getting clear requirements from business owners who don't know how to program their needs for an AI world. Why do you think the bridge between the two is so currently in disrepair or broken?
Yeah, well, interesting part, and I'll just talk about it from an AI perspective, getting into what the requirements are there. There's a huge gap that's happened, and the technology that's available today wasn't even available 18 months ago. So right off the bat, when you have that kind of shift, there's already some confusion on the engineering side to a degree about what is it that I can do with AI. But then beyond that comes into the business owner going, well, I didn't even know that was available. And plus, they're not even at a level that they understand enough about AI and the potential for automating the workflows that they have. So it's hard for them to even put a requirement together for the engineer just right off the bat because of that one gap. There's a big, huge knowledge gap on the business owner side at this point.
So, how do you, I guess, educate the business owners in a technology that they don't really have much insight into at all?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of business owners, right? So you got the ones who have a proclivity for understanding the workflows, because you have to have an understanding of, workflow optimization. The way I like to look at it is frontline people don't necessarily, they're out there to execute the workflows, right? And they're constantly the ones who know what's going right, what's going wrong. And the manager's the one who has to stand over the top of that, who's your business owner, and up to the director level, are the ones who are out there truly trying to change the way that they do business and the way that those operations work. So what happens with that business owner, with that manager or that director level person is they have an objective to learn AI, but do they have proclivity for AI? They may understand the process. They may not understand how to change that process so it fits into an AI world, because those are two different things. I can optimize for human resources to do the execution, or I can optimize into AI, which is truly a transformational, way of thinking. And so, how do you train people on that? Because of that large, from yes, I have a proclivity for AI, and to all the way to the point of I don't even want to touch it. I'm afraid of it. I don't know what to do with it. There are some trainings that need to be done inside there. And some, unfortunately, right now, we're inside that time period where it's you either learn it or you don't. But it's unfortunately that even the teams, meaning the HR teams and companies, don't have a vision of where AI is going. So they can't provide them the training because they don't even know what training they need. So right now, unfortunately, it's up to the individual to figure it out for themselves and go out and, YouTube and go on to chat or, Llama and ask it to train them on things if they have the interest to do so.
And it's like, so like in your work at Ascend AI, like you help build an office of AI for organizations. So when you first step into a new company, like that is experiences sort of disconnect. Like what are the initial signs that you see that kind of the business leaders and the engineering teams are experiencing this kind of disconnect?
Well, the first thing that comes out is like I said, an AI vision. If the company does not have that AI vision, it's difficult to have it so inside of the engineering teams to know what their guardrails are and what they need to be operating against. So that's the first thing that I see. That's top line, high level strategy piece. Getting down to the bottom line of frontline workers and the managers working with the engineers to come up with requirements. You'll walk in and sit down, and the first thing that I'll see is the director will not know specifically what needs to change and how AI in the situation can do it. And that means that they can't describe what that feature needs to be for the engineer to figure out how to solve for it.
And leaning more into what you're discovering on the daily and what you're getting into. I know we talked briefly about shadow AI, right? And so it's being used everywhere. You have no idea as the owner or the CEO, right? Management's unclear of who's using what and when. So how do you approach that with both the people that are using it, the leadership, the management in between? It seems like this, again, you said the last 18 months, everything has changed so dramatically. So how do people even go to approach? Because on one end, I feel like you want to encourage people to be using and learning about these tools, but then you need guardrails and you need to be aware, some sort of transparency. Just I'd love to learn more about how you guys actually apply that when you come in and you find all these things.
Yeah, and there's a top down and a bottoms up approach, and I'll look at it from the engineering as well
Okay.
and talk about that. But the top down approach is for the executive team to be in alignment that hey, AI is in our business and we need to do something about it. And so the first thing that they need to do is understand an inventory. If you don't know what's inside your business, you can't scale it, right? So what's that inventory? That inventory is what AI tools are actually in place. Where did AI creep in from personal bringing it in myself? I have my own account. I'm using it, but I'm putting my company data in there or company information in, and that can be forever lost once I leave the company. The other one is through the tools that are already in, or I should say the platforms that are already in place today, that there is AI inside those. There's no questions asked, but does it fit within the policy of the organization or the spirit of the way that they want to use it? Most cases, yes, but very possibly no. So you have to have an inventory of that. Then beyond that is an inventory of knowledge base. And that knowledge base isn't just of AI. It's around the workflows. It's around how do I manage a team when I'm getting to the point of having a team of 15 AI agents who are my employees now and 2 human employees. How do I manage that in training and making sure that the culture of the business understands this is what it's going to look like and train people to manage the AI agents as well. And then also organization changes to make sure that there are the right people in the right spots to manage those agents appropriately and to support those people who are managing the agents. So there's an engineer essentially who's tied to every SME in the business that can help them to be able to build out those, the different automations or, data points that they need to have. Looking at this from an engineer perspective, the engineer, on the other hand, has to know what's going on in terms of AI, but also has to have that inventory so they can understand what they're walking into. So before a requirement can be made, I need to understand what they're actually using today and where AI is already playing, because that will be the skeleton in the closet for them. Because once they start going in and understand that, oh, that data is actually residing somewhere else, I already have it. I didn't need to do anything for it other than just connect to it. to get the insights that I need. So from an engineer perspective, that inventory is ultimately important, and also understanding what the level of the individuals that I'm working with inside those organizations, what their needs are. And during this transition period now, and I'm going to call it, I'm thinking it's a 2 to 3 year transition. Some people might call me crazy and say that it's going to be much longer than that. I have a hard time believing that progressive companies are going to take any longer than that, because they're going to get absolutely taken by the competition who does it. But that transition is working with the engineer, quote unquote, patience, to work with folks inside the lines of business and understanding the inventory of what AI is there, what knowledge base is there, and helping them over the time to get over that arc of misunderstanding, essentially, to get them to the point of now we have an operating process between the business owner and the engineers.
Gotcha.
Question that's related. You have engineers that are using AI, but are resistant to AI being implemented organizationally because of fear of losing their team, their jobs, the way they do things.
Without question, yes. And it's a real scare, right? If you look at over the course of the last 3 months, literally the last 3 months of the ability of coding, and you guys will know this better than anyone else, but when it comes to coding, it's getting really, really good. 6 months ago, it wasn't even a question. It was like, it was just broken at the kernel, and it would just, cataclysm or catastrophically fail, and you have to go in and rebuild. And still, yes, some parts are like that, but it's not, it's getting much, much better now. So, but yes, many engineers are fearing for that. And this is where from my perspective, an engineer is very well suited to be able to pick up and, not from an IT perspective. When we think of IT in general, that's all infrastructure pieces. And, I've got to manage, I've got to, admin, I've got to support. Those are all functions that will still remain for the big infrastructure items. Where I think the transition for engineers right now is really going into, like I said before, working with the SMEs and the lines of business and understanding what their needs are, because they have to help them transition and understand, here are the business processes you have, here's how AI can support, and becoming kind of an internal advisor with them for them. And there are two different levels of engineers from my perspective. There's the forward development engineer. So those folks are going to be the ones who are more apt to understand the actual workflows. Then you have the full stack engineer who needs to support them, for deployed engineers. So with that full stack engineer doing the really deep stuff. So the forward deployed engineer would go and understand, I can use N8N to go into, to provide, let's just say enrichment for data for marketing, and they understand how to do that type of work. It's a little lighter work because it's all vibe code for the most part. On the other hand, when it gets more down to, okay, we have a supply chain issue that we need to solve for with our actual suppliers and managing the just-in-time supply, and we have to go in there and actually develop our own AI capability, that full stack engineer comes in and builds that out. So I think that's where true engineering is going to transition into corporate life, someone who's deep into the IT organization.
Yeah, so it's just a fundamental. My next question was going to be how do you see this affecting kind of that middle management layer, right? Because like an engineering lead, for instance, now you've got code coming from all over the place. It used to just be like, I'm going to manage these engineers, we'll talk to the product folks, and then we're going to take that and we're going to turn it into something that actually works. Now the product people can submit code, and the designers, right? Because of these advances over the last 3 months or whatever. So you kind of spoke to it as just that
Yeah,
these roles are just changing so rapidly. And I think adaptability is going to be the trait that really helps someone on more the traditional engineering background, right? Is just be open to it, learn, and upskill as much as you can.
absolutely. Because the company is going to have to go through a transition to understand how and where an engineer needs to fit inside the organization, right? Deeper down into that is the resourcing model. And I think this is important for engineers to understand, that that resourcing model, the way that you see it today, is going to be flipped on its head. And many companies that I already work with, they've already done it. And so what that model looks like and I mentioned this with lines of business, it's no different inside of engineering, which is you'll have a manager who's now overseeing, 6 to 8, however many engineers with them, working on a very specific project. and have a project manager sitting outside helping them with the agile process. What happens next? Well, because the coding is becoming good inside of AI, those, eight, I'll just use it as easily, eight engineers are going to turn into two. And then the remaining six are going to be AI engineers. And so that manager over that engineering staff has to be able to look across and understand, okay, the code is being written, but what's my QA on that? And so that QA is actually going to be an inspection agent. So add that to another, so we said it was 6 agents. Now it's going to be 7 or 8, 9, 10 agents because we're going to build agents that are constantly inspecting going around that code. And that might just be in the development phase. But then once we start getting into production phase, then there is the audit phase. And those are different agents. So I have a whole slew of agents who are swarming around this, and only those anomalies get kicked out to the humans. So human in the loop on that one has a couple of pitfalls to it. One is the human in the loop has to understand that whole process and how it's working, and not only understand the process, but how to understand when I need an agent, what they need to be for, and then how to manage those agents. Secondarily is those engineers who this human in the loop is getting kicked to have now suddenly, there's a lot of coding where I can just sit down and just kind of go mindless on it and go, right? And that's downtime for my brain. The unfortunate part is when we start to boil it down, think of it like a wine sauce. You start off with a cup and you get it down to a quarter of a cup. What's the flavor like? It's super intense. Same thing happens to those two resources. Everything they receive is super intense. Like it's now not, I go through my day and I have waves of intensity and ease. Now it's all intense. And so there has to be inside the resourcing model, I'll call it headroom, that needs to be there for them to have downtime and literally step away from the desk, and just spend time doing something more mundane because it's all gone. So that whole model, that's what the future is going to start looking like, at least at this point, that I can prognosticate, if you will.
Right, and it'll really change what the team is, because ultimately then the team dynamic isn't necessarily just between the team members that are doing the heavy lifting, but also between the team members that are doing the heavy lifting and the AI that they're programming. Like the AI ultimately becomes part of the team. A really crazy thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dynamic that, you look at it from a cultural perspective, and we work with chief people officers talking through this and understanding how do I transition my business to this effectively, because there's lots of training, there's lots of cultural pieces that need to go into it. The whole resource model is now flipped on its head. How do I make sure that I'm always in touch with my people to make sure that that headroom is enough for them because they're so critical.
Right. And I think that headroom, I mean, kind of relating a little bit back to Hellenic practices where it's so important to care about the person, right? Because ultimately, like burnout was an issue before when you were doing some of that dumb work, right? You still had burnout. Now, when you have engineers that are dealing with intense problems the whole time, I feel like the issue of burnout becomes a much bigger red flag to watch out for.
And it's critical. That's the problem. It becomes not just oh, well, we got a problem and we'll just work through it. No, it compounds so fast. I was fortunate to work with some of the foundational LLMs and helping them with research projects and building out their knowledge base to get to where the LLMs are today, and bringing in super high level PhDs of STEM and bringing postdoctorates in and helping them to get that knowledge base in. And the work was so intense that, the folks that we had, and we had such short time periods to do it, it was so intense that if they didn't get it done in this time period, it literally made the model slow down for months because we couldn't get it done. What happened is there were only a limited number of resources, and that's what we're going to end up with here is limited number of resources who truly understand that unique environment of AI and human, that if one person fails because those things that they're working on are so critical, it's going to set the project back by long periods of time. Especially, we're talking AI time now, which is super short in comparison. So that will, have significant impact. It will be long periods.
I mean, like kind of related. I see you describe the kind of work of Ascend as building a durable value creation platform for companies using AI as the lever. So, like for an engineering leader or even the companies themselves, like what does the durability part of that actually look like in a field where like the tech's changing constantly?
No, it's a great question because the way the organization has to get built is not, as I mentioned before, it's not the same as what we think about today. And it's not even something that we can comprehend today, really, until that's already in place. But so the durability part is having it so the organization has those checks and balances to understand what is actually happening. This is what I mentioned with the CPO, the chief people officer, being able to keep track of what's happening with the individuals and ensure that we have the best available talent, sitting human talent, available at all times to do the roles that they're supposed to be doing. I know we're going to say supposed to be doing that we want them to be doing to be able to drive and deliver the results that we want. And so, but the durability starts with just a basic foundation of what's the vision, what's the goal. From there, having in place all of the parts and pieces. So in this case, it's a chief AI officer that stands in, that oversees the governance, it oversees the policy, it oversees a committee internally, that's overseeing all of the AI, that it does achieve the ROIs that are necessary. So truly naming the KPIs in advance, then prioritizing the projects, getting the features and communicated in, understanding what that needs to be up front, and then going into execution with development. So having that engine running is the
Mhm.
durability piece, and you have to have the right resources in place to be able to do it.
So I guess that's it, right? Is like Kyle gone?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was the chief AI officer. Do we have enough of those, right? Because everything is so new. I mean, I feel like this is something that you're going to come into a shortage almost probably immediately already, I would imagine.
Yeah, and there are two sides to that coin, right? So, and I'm going to hit it from an IT perspective. Lots of companies say, "Oh, I got my guy. I'm going to go ahead and put him on it."
Yep.
It's like, well, you know what? They're not that. They don't have that capability. And though you want someone from internally to be it, it's actually the chief AI officer is a different story. You want someone who's really progressive, gets it, and can build the organization. Everyone underneath there, you want to bring in very specific roles, but most part, you want to keep the people internally. They've got the capability to be able to, they have the internal tribal knowledge, they have the know-how, they operate in the political system, they get it. But, going back to the point with, are those resources scarce? Absolutely. There are no, you go out and it's kind of like the 90s with networking. No one knew networking, right? It was just, the guys in propeller heads like me that went out and said, "Hey, I'll figure it out." And we figured it out. And then rose to whatever levels they could get to. Same thing's happening here. So the resources aren't there, but the training needs to be there. But the reason why training isn't there in a lot of cases in support is because the business just doesn't have the strategy. And you'll hear me say that time and time and time again.
And I was just going to say, speaking of this kind of resources, like with the technology growing and developing at such a fast pace and there being a kind of shortage of people, like, is there ever going to be a kind of stasis, do you think, where we have enough people because it feels like the development of technology is way faster than people can learn. So we're not going to have, right, like an AI expert right now is somebody that's been in the field for 7 years? You know what I mean? Like, you don't have somebody that's like, "Ah, yes, I have 20 years of experience in this," and I don't
Yeah.
think, as the technology develops, we're not gonna have time to catch up. Like, where do these people come from?
Yeah, so I'm going to mention a dynamic that's really funny in the same line, which is, yes, the technology is moving faster than people can keep up, but bigger than that, the technology is entering companies at a pace that the companies can't keep up. So, which is even a bigger problem, right? My people are using it, but I have no idea what they're doing with it, and so which promotes a lot of risk. Will there be a stasis? I'm going to say something that's probably not a popular thing to say, which is there will be. And the reason for it is unfortunately, yes, people are going to be laid off of their jobs. And as we know, need is the genesis of creation, right? So my general sense is that we will end up with a lot more people because, they've gotten burned, unfortunately, in their roles that they were doing. And they finally went out, they said, I have to go out and do something now to better myself and become a part of the new economy and the new way operations are going. That, like I said, it's not a popular way of looking at it. It's an unfortunate reality that I see within my own clients that this is happening. And those folks who are being let go are being let go, and we're coaching them to do it in a way that allows those folks to get proper training, understand how AI fits, how it works, what they need to be doing to, especially in the role that they were in, and pretty much life coaching them into understanding. And the state of Utah, actually, where I am right now, is working on they understand how many jobs will be lost over time and working on those transitions, which is really nice.
Oh, so they're already putting a plan in place of like, here's a path, right?
Oh, more than that, they've actually put money down to say we want all employees inside the state of Utah to get trained, and they
Gotcha.
provide a stipend. It's
Well,
literally like 50% stipend to the company to get their employees trained for this reason.
There's a major human element to this, and I'd like to jump a little bit into that, the psychology of everything, especially for you guys and your team. So you're helping companies make this transition, coming in making all these recommendations, and I'm curious for your internal team and engineers, how do you prevent them from experiencing some form of fatigue, right? Because I would imagine you have to be on the cutting edge of all these tools that are constantly changing and know to be able to make the recommendations to your clients, what's real and what's not. And just like, how does that look on the day to day with your people?
Yeah, so we've tiered it out. And so just as I said before, you've got the forward deployed engineer and you have the full stack engineer.
Yeah.
And so we know that the full stack engineer can go into their space and they are that kind of people that are just going to work. I mean, engineers who
Yeah.
work all night long and, do everything, full tilt. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm broken for a couple days. Okay, fine, go take some time. So we have those engineers that are just way in. But our forward deployed engineers are not. They're the ones who are doing the real look at the simple vibe code. Those are fun challenges, and the right personality character loves going in and doing the challenges, and they can just work on that stuff for a great period of time. The other part that I will say is we grab people from out of school, and because we want them to work hard and enjoy what they're doing and get some real value out of this so they can move on to whatever role they want to move on to into the future. And so, but that forward deployed engineer is hungry for information, hungry to provide solutions. And so putting the right personality characteristic or characters in the right spot, and letting them thrive where they thrive is the biggest piece.
Yeah. Is there certain non-technical indicators that you're looking for when you're making these hires? Obviously, young, hungry, fresh out of school, but is there specific personality characteristics that you're queuing in on?
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity is the biggest one. We have a voracious appetite for learning. And, we can, couple of use cases right out the bat. So we have one gentleman who he went into business, and he's like, in high school, I was a coder. I went into business because I wanted to do business and I love business, but now I've got both of them and I just want to go back to coding for business. And he is that full stack developer. He just goes bonkers. He just loves to do it. I have another gentleman who went into finance, and so he's our forward deployed engineer on situations for clients. And so he's understands the financial end of things. He understands the sales, marketing, and basically anything go to market, and can go in and understand the situation and architect a solution, and if need be, go in and actually execute that solution. And just because it's so different and new for him to go in and actually see it done. So what I like to see is a voracious appetite for learning, an ability to be able to see things from multiple sides, meaning that, I am not just, I think the best way to say it is, mathematicians are great at music, right? Whoa. Whoever thought something so creative, but yet something that's not, getting that dichotomy of individuals to be able to formulate and bring them in and teach them. And what we found is by allowing them to work in their sweet spot, and this goes for any person, that once you get them in their superpower area, they thrive and they just move and they can get so much more done
Yep.
and enjoy it, which is the most important part.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That helps with the stress and burnout, right? If they're enjoying what they're doing, then they're going to want to do it and continue doing it. Our listeners find more about you, Craig, and specifically what you guys are up to at Ascend AI. Where should they look for that?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go to ascendlabs.ai, And we actually have a really cool, we do lots of testing of new technologies on there. So you can come in and see the latest like lead magnets. We build a lead magnet that's custom for every company and every person that comes into it. It's awesome. So you can go in there. It's a tool finder right now. And but yes, you can learn a lot about our capabilities inside that website.
Excellent. And is there anything right now, like what's right around the corner? I know everything that you guys are doing is basically on the bleeding edge, but is there something specific that you're super excited about in the next 3 to 6 months?
I would say right now it's about how companies are integrating AI into their businesses and how they're really realizing that they have to have a strategy around it and execute effectively to see the value. I think what we're going to see is, from an engineering perspective, is going to be pulling engineers out of their comfort levels and bringing them into the operations side to understand what those workflows are and having them work in places that they normally don't. So sales, marketing, customer success, and support. Yes, the technologies that they work on are there, but they're going to be asked to start implementing those AIs that are existing already in the infrastructure that they put in place. That is the lowest hanging fruit business unit. It's the lowest hanging fruit value point for the company and it's the easiest one for the engineer to deploy themselves in.
Excellent.
That's going to be the biggest unlock in the next 6 months here.
All right, great. Well, we really appreciate you joining us. It's been enlightening and fun, and I'm sure the listeners will agree. So really appreciate the time.